Hello and welcome back to another episode of Nick Tiffany's Movie Reviews, coming at you online and in print format sooner rather than later at nicktiffany.com. Gotta get more things posted on there and play a little catch up. But you can also find me at Nick Tiffany's Movie Reviews, NT Movie Reviews on most social medias, at podcast form on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen to those, and then all the good social medias there. It's been a little while since doing a review here. I've kind of debated going back and forth. I did a lot of end of year 2024 catch up. So there will be a separate video kind of rounding out the year, probably at least 25 picks of mine that are things that I would recommend to any moviegoer. There was more than enough that I saw that was like, okay, I gotta talk about this in some capacity. Gotta be able to share these, especially since now a lot of the Oscar films are finally hitting streaming services. So you can kind of dig through what was good, what was a little overhyped, what went underseen last year. So we'll be getting to that. This I had to do while it's fresh on my mind, playing a bunch of 2025 movie catch up over the last week or so, both streaming and a little bit of in theater action. I just felt like I needed to get on the ball again. I'll lead with the fact that I haven't seen anything yet this year that has just like blown me away, has just like led me and drove me to being like, you guys need to go see this. There's a couple things coming out in the next week, though, however, which I'm really looking forward to seeing. Magazine Dreams with Jonathan Majors, and then Bob Trevino Likes It from director Tracy Lehman, who I got to speak with at Seattle International Film Festival last year. Film finally got distribution, is being released, going wider next weekend. So I'm super stoked to talk about that. But before then, I probably saw like about 7 films in the last week and some change maybe here that to varying degrees, some better than others. I was surprised by the ones that I enjoyed more and a little surprised by the ones that I enjoyed less. And so I kind of want to start on we'll start with the bad. And the bad was not egregious in this case. There were 2 films, two, almost 3, that were just kind of like, they were fine. It's a new film called Opus with Edebiri, John Malkovich, Juliette Lewis, kind of about this young journalist at this journalist at this company. For 30 years, there's been this elusive pop star who tore up the charts, was everywhere, was everything to everybody, a god in the world of music, disappears, goes off the radar. 30 years later, he's announcing the comeback album. He's played by John Malkovich, who, to his credit, does have a couple of really interesting songs. The Dream helped out with some of the soundtrack for the film. That was, the credits leading up to the movie. I was like, oh, this is going to be like a musical heavy soundtrack. I was thinking this was just kind of like a horror thriller type thing. And in a way, what it was trying to do kind of reminded me of Don't Blink, the Zoe Kravitz Channing Tatum movie that came out last year. Except that movie did everything that this was trying to do, I think, much better. Unfortunately, there's some fun aspects. Alfred Moretti is the John Malkovich character. And, he's just this wonderful, elegant pop star, playing around, dancing with everybody, getting a little inappropriate, but that's part of the shtick. And he's got these almost like disciples around him. Once the people are invited out to his compound to go interview him and listen to the album and get a sense of what he's been working on out there. And for all the intriguing pieces that it kind of sets up, and clearly Io Debris characters like the I am so new to this whole world, my boss and all these other famous people are here to listen to it, and they all seem to know each other. They don't mind that this is all weird because like we're in the presence of a god, so put your phone in the basket, girl. Don't ask questions. And of course, you should be asking questions, but you're not going to get answers out there. And I just felt like for everything it was trying to set up, you're like, I know this is going to go south at some point. You're just waiting for when, or you're waiting for what's the weird thing that's going to start happening. And there are more than a few signs. I just felt like the pace at which it moves didn't do it many favors because it's not a long film. I think it's only a little over an hour and a half, maybe. And it just felt like it was a lot longer. It just felt like we're waiting to get to the point where you reveal everything or when things just go haywire. And for everything fun that it was trying to do as well with the music, I was like, it almost felt like they didn't fully commit to that either. This wasn't like an M. Night Shyamalan trap situation where you're like, well, there's like 8 full songs in this movie. And then there's a whole like thriller going on in the background. Weirdly enough, the movie might have been a little bit better if it was some more of that because the John Malkovich songs and the sequences, truthfully, were pretty fun. They're not bad songs, and I was like, I could see this being poppy and digging into a little more of these themes here, of relevance or how someone makes that comeback. But again, I know that's not totally the story at hand. I don't know. I was a little let down by this one, truthfully. I was excited to see Iowa Edebiri starring in a leading role. I think she's a great actress. The character here she plays is kind of more of the same from what we've seen to her, like the shy, kind of little awkward, funny, quirky, throws lots of faces, which I like. I'm just ready maybe for her to try something a little bit deeper next time, maybe. A little looking for a little something different from her, perhaps in a next role. Or maybe I thought this was going to be a little bit more serious, and it still kind of bordered that line of like, we don't know what tone of movie we're trying to settle on, and we don't know what the feel of the story is that we're trying to sell. So I think in the audience that was just hard because it was like there's interesting enough stuff happening, and I like a lot of these actors, and there've been a couple like fun little sequences here, but by and large it was like I'm waiting for more to happen. Speaking of waiting for more to happen, going over to our next film, again, not nearly as egregious as I would say film critics of the internet is tearing it up to be. But the Russo brothers, Anthony and Joe, who are responsible for two, three, multiple just mega hits from Winter Soldier to Captain America Civil War, and then you've got Endgame and Infinity War. You know, these guys were the bread and butter for Marvel for so long. And it's just been so disappointing to see the projects that they've done outside of Marvel. I mean, they did that movie with Tom Holland, Cherry, a little more of a serious one. They did The Gray Man for Netflix with Ryan Gosling and Chris Evans and maybe Anna de Armas. I'm trying to think off the top of my head. It was just a movie where, in that case, was like for the star power you have, for the budget that you guys have, for the types of films that you have been accustomed to making now. This should be great. I remember watching Gray Man and I was like, this spy movie just feels so empty. And I'm like, and I love I love Ryan Gosling. And I love Chris Evans. Gosling more than Evans. But it felt weird watching it because it was like you put so much of a budget into this. And it's far more of the funny, goofy shtick, Marvel comedy that we're used to. Observational little quips while they're being shot at or whatever it might be. And so after watching that movie, I was just kind of like, I don't know what to expect from the Russo brothers anymore. Obviously, they're coming back now to direct Secret Wars for Marvel. I think Marvel was like, hey, we need you guys to come in and steer the ship in the right direction. And I think for them, this is kind of a break because everything else that they've done outside of this, truthfully, has not been that wonderful. So, Electric State is their, new original film or new pseudo original film for Netflix, written by Christopher Marcus, Stephen McFeely, and Simon Stonelug. You got Millie Bobby Brown, these orphan teens in this kind of futuristic, not too distant future world where robots kind of were companions to humans for many, many years. And then there grew this, resistance almost, of course, as it always happens in movies. Humans can't trust the robots. There are some good robots. We've mistreated the robots. Think Ex Machina. If these things can feel and they have feelings and they're programmed to feel, then they're going to be upset. And so essentially what's happened is you've gotten rid of almost all the robots now. And what people do in, a very Ready Player One fashion, you can sit down anywhere and you can put these goggles on and you can live a better life somewhere else. Depending on how much money you have and what kind of job you work, you can move your way up and down the scale there with a little more comfort. Millie Bobby Brown loses her younger brother, so she thinks. This young little robot comes up to her, perhaps being controlled by her brother, and she's got to go find where his body is. He was taken as a young, gifted kid, thought dead at one point, but eventually this robot finds its way to her. So you do have this story of sibling love and wanting to care for one another. And, I'm going to do anything to go get my brother and protect him. And then at the same time, Star-Lord, Chris Pratt comes into town. Of course, this guy can sneak you into where all the robots are, where humans aren't allowed to go. Of course, he's a ruffian. And of course, he's kind of Star-Lord looking-esque. His humor is exactly what you would expect for Guardians of the Galaxy. It was just a little distracting, maybe. Chris Pratt is one where I think he is more talented than he gets credit for sometimes. However, I think either he doesn't challenge himself enough, or the studio's like, no, we want Chris Pratt as, the Guardians of the Galaxy. We want Star-Lord. Just do that in our movie. And, I would say a fair amount of times it kind of works for him. It's like Ryan Reynolds. You're just going to keep printing money doing the same thing, I guess. I kind of grow tired of it after a while because it just feels like anyone else could have played this role and they would have brought something different to it. Where it wouldn't have been distracting in the sense of like, I'm just waiting for the smart ass to say something. I'm just waiting for, some little goofy thing to happen and him to overreact and blow up. And And of course it happened. I mean, I could script it out. It was like, okay, I know when the moment's coming with him. And then you've got this whole weird, like, Mr. Peanut, as in Blancher's Peanuts, Mr. Peanut, with the top hat and the glasses and the cane, like, led the Revolutionary War of the robots against the humans, pretty much. Whole other, just like, feels unnecessary. Feels like I know why you need the product placement because this movie cost like $320 million to produce, which is nuts. We'll get to that. But I'm like having Mr. Peanut as your mascot is this like, hey, he's our leader. It's like an Abraham Lincoln type in this movie, and it's just weird. So, there's battles. Stanley Tucci is the bad guy, and he's always calm and quite measured, and he was fine. He was good in the movie. It's not bad. It's just, I'm like, $320 million. That's a lot of freaking money. And it doesn't show on the screen. And hey, of course, I'm going to plug Zack Snyder here because I was reading some articles all about Netflix movies and whatnot. And they're like, hey, at least with Rebel Moon, you spent 160, $180 million. And somehow you got like 4 films out of that, rated R and not rated R. And it shows. I mean, like that budget, when you watch those movies, things look really good. In Electric State, in some instances, it was like, where'd all that money go? Probably paying Chris Pratt and all the people. So it just, I don't know. Millie Bobby Brown's not bad. But again, maybe moving her away from the thriller, Stranger Things, like, I don't know. I'm curious to see her do something else as well. I think she is talented. I think that, again, sometimes she or Chris Pratt could be limited by the project that they're in or what people have essentially thrust upon them because you're Netflix's little darling. Stranger Things season 4, 5, whatever, it's going to come out eventually. So we're going to need you to keep you in the Netflix wheel. Then it's just like, I would rather see some better projects for them both, truthfully. Again, not a bad movie, but I can imagine that going back to Marvel was a mutually beneficial thing for everybody. Ki Kwan's in this movie as the trailer plays alongside me here. They're like, we got new Oscar winner Ki Kwan. He's gonna be in the movie for like 5 minutes. Awesome. Why? Just to say that you did it? Just to say that, like, he's a fun guy and we want to put fun people in our movies. Give him something to do. I feel like this is also a growing trend of like, at least he did that one action Valentine's Day movie himself. But I'm like, I don't want to just see him for the sake of seeing him. I want the role to feel important. So I'm looking for a very different movie than what the Russos are selling, truthfully. But I don't know. For a PG-13 Netflix original movie, I don't know. It was all right. It was fun. Much better in some ways than Electric State or Opus. It's a film called Companion. My buddy Preston, for like, feels like weeks, has been like, yo, we gotta watch this. I've already seen it twice. Let's watch it again. It's got Jack Quaid, Dennis Quaid's son. If you watch The Boys, that's how I know him. Anytime I see him, there's another movie, Novocaine, that we'll talk about today as well. But we'll get there. He is all I can see him as. He's just this likable, kind of dorky, affable, genuine. He's full of faults, living in a world full of these superheroes. There's something about his performance that through all the gross nature of The Boys and the unrealisticness and just the zaniness of what that show has become. Huey is always this role, this beacon of like, okay, you know what? I'm like, even through everything that he's gone through and changed, I'm like, Huey's our lighthouse. We can always find our way home there. And so Companion, I was like, all right, we got Huey, and we've also got Lucas Gage, who from White Lotus to, gosh, a number of independent films, I'm seeing him pop up everywhere. He's great. Sophie Thatcher, who I'm not too familiar with, kind of playing opposite of Jack Quaid in this film. I know I've seen her. She was in Heretic. Okay, that's what it was more recently. She was one of the Mormon sisters in Heretic. That was a good movie. She was good in that movie. So Companion, kind of, billed as from the studio that brought you The Notebook. This thriller, love, horror, sci-fi film. It's not so subtle about what it is. It's one of those where I'm like, how do I like vaguely tell you what the premise is about and still leave enough to be a surprise? But I would say that going into it, film's called Companion. On the poster, this girl's eyes are just completely white. The log line, a weekend getaway with friends in a remote cabin, turns into chaos after it's revealed that one of the guests is not what they seem. In my head, I was going in thinking supernatural rather than the sci-fi route. But I'll just say early on, the film has no secrets about the fact that, like, hey, there's something off about this girl. She is referred to really interestingly by people. The film's name is Companion. is this just some like AI robot thing, companion, Smash Buddy, whatever? Who knows where it is, what it came from? But that you're getting those vibes pretty early on, and I'm letting you know that because that is kind of how the film is introduced to you. Where it takes it from there is quite interesting. And there's certainly really fun moments in the movie, I think, as a result of what it reveals or what you learn about this companion or how people interact with this companion. There are aspects of the story that are quite thrilling, that are very fun and funny as well. And truthfully, I think the biggest plus for me was watching Jack Quaid kind of play against type. Usually, this wonderful, nice, overwhelmingly helpful guy who's just kind of an asshole here, like a called him a douchebag. I'm like, I was like, I did not expect him to be so rude or just so like, I was like, damn, who hurt you, Jack? I was like, this guy's a bad dude. And just in his actions or how he speaks, I was so thrown by it because of my expectations of, the type of roles he usually plays, truthfully. He's pretty docile in most of his other roles, I would say. But this was like, whoa. I was like, dude, all right, I'm glad that you had this in you. The film as a whole, pretty fun. Not so many surprises as far as like where the story might end up. It telegraphed a little bit perhaps down the line or what you know of the companion. The ending is maybe not the biggest shock or it doesn't blow you away. But I thought it was more than interesting enough. It was good for a few little quick thrills or a quick like, whoa, couple jumps. Nothing like what I thought it might be. But a companion, not a bad effort. Drew Hancock, writer and director. It was pretty fun, And unlike the Electric State or Opus, it was shorter, got to the point, told the story well, looked great. That's all you can kind of ask for, which is why I feel like moving up our list again, we're getting to the top here now. You got Black Bag, which is directed by Steven Soderbergh, who many of you know for the Ocean's films. Oh God, he did those hospital movies too, Contagion, the Red Pill, or whatever that other one was. Black Bag, Kate Blanchett, Michael Fassbender. They're spies, they're married, but there's all these secrets and this deception. Who's betraying their nation? Who's betraying who? Sold. And the movie's an hour and a half. The movie's literally an hour and a half. So, an hour and 20 minutes of movie and then some credits. In my head, I was kind of like, okay, I'm down for everything that they're selling me. Pierce Brosnan's, and I was like, okay, is an hour and a half enough time? That was my worry going into this. Was I really like all these players in here? Jean Reggie, can't remember the last bit of his last name there, but another big Netflix name from Bridgerton. More than a few people you'll recognize popping up in this. Is it Jean Reggie Paul? I gotta look this up now. I got Page, Reggie Jean Page. There we go. Flipped it there. And there's another Skarsgård in this movie, Gustav, rounding out the Skarsgård clan. But Black Bag, it's a phrase that they kind of use. Hey, where are you going this weekend, honey? I've got to take a trip to somewhere off the books. It's Black Bag. Can't talk about it, sweetheart. And it's like, okay. Every agent's got their secrets. The Black Bag is the easy go-to, like, oh, can't really talk about that. It's the Black Bag, I won't pry. But when certain nations are pitted against one another and there's a lot of espionage perhaps going on internally, Michael Fassbender really turns into this just do it all accountant style, down to the wire. I mean, he's just able to observe so well, manipulate so well, get information out of people so well. And it's very interesting. There is definitely a romance aspect to this movie. I wouldn't call it a romance film per se, but this idea of acting out of love for your partner, especially if you're both in this world of spies and espionage and deception, that relationship certainly looks very different. So watching how they kind of worked through some of that in the movie was very interesting. Kate Blanchett, as always, is just stunning. She's an incredible actress. She works really well across Fassbender because she feels, and it's not revealing anything, but the way he plays things like so stone cold, he can be so stoic, silent, just gives these looks of like, he knows something. I was like, I don't even know what he knows about me, but he knows something, is how you feel in the audience. And so watching Kate Blanchett play off of some of that too. And you're like, is she spinning a web of lies right now? Or is she like actually telling the truth here? And does he believe it? Is he going to believe it? I don't know. I thought it was very interesting. The movie, again, only an hour and a half, sets up what it needs to do, ends it pretty well, doesn't overstay its welcome. I think the biggest downside to the film maybe is just that it's that short. I saw people call it like, the perfect like 3.5 star film or the perfect B movie, and not like a, bad B movie, but just like 4 out of 5. They were like, the movie's pretty solid. It does what it needs to do. It's entertaining. It's got action. It's rated R, so they don't like, cop out on the action. It's fun. Maybe I just wish I had a little more. That's probably because I'm watching, or I just finished watching The Agency with Michael Fassbender, this kind of CIA group over in London. Very, very good show. Kind of a slow burn, setting up spies and espionage. Jeffrey Wright's in the movie. Richard Gere, great. Catherine Waterston. I'm like, really, really terrific cast. Also about espionage. Him coming out of deep cover after 6 years. This whole idea of playing with love and emotion, and how does someone just drop 6 years of contacts and go back to their real life? And what does that look like as the agency tries to reintroduce you? Some of it kind of has to do with some of the Ukraine and Russian conflicts going on as far as where some of the battles are being set. Far more high minded, intelligence heavy show, I would say, but very fascinating. Michael Fassbender is just such a terrific actor. So if you like him, the show is also worth checking out. I want to say it was Paramount Plus, like through Showtime or something like that. I really enjoyed it. A little slower for some of my friends. There aren't as many bursts of action, but if you are into spies and espionage and some of how all of that works on the back end, very good, very worth checking out. So now, briefly, we'll go over three quick films. The three that I would say overwhelmingly I was way more positive on than as opposed to the rest here. Mickey 17 is a film that has been delayed easily over a year, directed by Bong Joon Ho, who you may know, who directed Parasite, that won the Oscar, I forget how many years ago, for Best Picture. Bong Joon Ho adapted this sort of graphic novel. Robert Pattinson is the lead, playing multiple kind of versions of himself. This whole idea is, this is a very sci-fi fantasy comedy, kind of dark, definitely dark comedy, looking at humanity and its last hope on Earth. Let's just send people to the stars. Let's go colonize another planet. It's our way to get off. There's not enough work. There's not enough food. Everybody wants to leave. And Robert Pattinson's character, is a little bit in debt. He's got nothing to live for, no family there. So he signs up to be an expendable to like really get on this ship, to really get away from these people chasing him and all these things. And what being an expendable means is that we can pretty much 3D print your body every time you die. So you're going to be the one that we're sending out on really dangerous explorations as we go out into space. And, we're going to be running tests on you to see how your body responds to things before we risk the lives of everybody else. And, Robert Pattinson's kind of got this like Steve Buscemi voice he's doing for. He's like, kind of like, I can't even do it. But the way he's talking was it was very interesting because you don't know what it's like to be printed out again in 3D. Your organs are kind of cold. So very, like, just very different from the beginning. It was kind of like, okay, this is the voice we're going with, and this is, all right, it's Pattinson. Okay, all right. Mark Ruffalo is kind of like the crazy cult leader of this expedition. This once governor who failed at running for another position on Earth, and it's like, you know what? I'm going to take my constituents and my loyal fans and get them out of here. Much has been made about who's this character based off of. If you asked Mark Ruffalo, he'd probably tell you it was Donald Trump, and you can see it. I kind of felt it in the performance and how he talked or how he kind of moves certain things. And interestingly enough, though, he was like, no, it really wasn't based on Trump. He was like, there's a lot of Eastern European and Asian leaders and warlords from history that we've kind of looked at as far as how they're so fanatical and take their people and put them into harm's way in these situations. And so there's definitely a lot of political discussion at the core of the film. And there's a lot of politics in how you're going to treat people. Or, okay, you guys get slop and I'm up here in my nice area and I'm eating steak, or I'm eating artificial steak at the very least, or getting the pamper that the stowage class does not. And then, of course, if they eventually land on this planet, there's all these weird little alien creatures, and then you get into the notion of like, well, we got to get rid of the aliens, but we are the aliens. Mickey 17, interesting, very, very interesting from start to finish, and where they were going to take the story, how they were going to kind of wrap it all together. This is a cut of the film, I believe, that Warner Brothers either requested or edited or helped ask Bong Joon Ho to edit because he had previously submitted another version of this film. Like this, I want to say this movie was supposed to be out like almost a year ago, truthfully. But after test screenings, people were like, hey, maybe we're not getting it. Maybe it's the classic Warner Brothers, like, there's not enough comedy. It's not funny enough for people. We got to be able to hit all four quadrants, like the Flash director said. You got to take your grandma to this movie, is what Warner Brothers expects for, this kind of big budget movie. And I think the film, unfortunately, is predicted to lose like 70 some $1 million, which is not going to help Warner Brothers in their current financial situation either, but they reap what they sow. It's just me. But Mickey 17, I don't know. I would be curious to see the other cut of the film based on how this one progressed, based on the story and the comedy of it all. Maybe I felt like it was just a little too funny, maybe, or they couldn't quite commit to telling something that that there's a lot of messages that they're trying to air out. There's a lot of things that they're talking about. There's a lot of issues that go on that worlds and nations and people face, and you kind of get into a little bit of it. But again, it's kind of this satirical. You're like, it's dark humor to a degree. Maybe I just wanted a little bit more than that, but more, I enjoyed it more than I did. I was hoping to enjoy it more, but I had a good time with it. I thought it was really interesting, and I've thought about it a lot since seeing it, so it definitely stuck in some ways. Robert Pattinson was great, especially playing multiple versions of himself with these different personalities. It might be one that you wait for at home. I think in the theater it was great. I don't know. I don't know. The more I'm talking about it out loud now as I say it, it was good. It was good. It was not what I hoped, which is why, again, I think the film that I enjoyed the most out of all of these was the most surprising to me. Top two. At number two, because it's not one, is Novocaine, another Jack Quaid release. Essentially this film, action comedy. He's a character who has, this real life disease where he doesn't feel pain. He doesn't feel sensations or pressure. You could burn his hand and he wouldn't feel it. You go around his house at the very beginning of the film and like everything, every sharp corner is kind of bubbled and taped off so he doesn't accidentally cut himself or puncture himself and not know it. He's only got some limited silverware options. He lives a very, very careful life because, he could nick himself on something and bleed out and not even know it. He wouldn't even feel it. Because of this, he's lived a very sheltered and very banal kind of life. He's a bank manager, doesn't do anything too adventurous, has lived past the life expectancy of what, his own parents thought he might, just give him the disease that he has. And everything kind of changes when, he starts really noticing this new girl who works at the bank with him. She just totally catches his eye. He's got a thing for her, and I think she can kind of tell it. She's played by Amber Midthunder, who, if you saw the movie Prey, she was the lead actress in that. And she was incredible, so badass. And I feel like I want to say her mom is a casting director because I feel like I've seen that last name pop up in like a few movies recently. So I'll do some double checking on that there. But she plays Sherry, and he's just got this big crush on her. She kind of makes the first move as far as like, well, hey, would you ever want to get lunch sometime or eat lunch together? Eventually he kind of accepts. He's got to work himself up. He's got to talk to his buddies online, like, hey, should I do this? She's all you talk about, man. You gotta. So he works up the courage to do it. They have a great time. Next day, they're at work. Everything should be going swimmingly, and then a bank robbery happens. And of course, they abduct Sherry. And then, someone's killed. There's, all sorts. He takes a couple punches. It's just madness. They take her and they run. And this guy who's never done anything bold or crazy or adventurous in his life says, I'm going to go get her and I'm going to do whatever it takes to go get this girl back. And in this weird way, like his superhero origin story starts because this dude could take 10 punches to the face, wouldn't feel a thing. He's laughing at him, spitting back at him like all those badass characters in movies where you're like, dude, don't. I'm like, stop teasing him. He's just gonna like pull more of your teeth out. And they're like, nah, man, screw you. And spit blood at him. And you're like, oh, no, they're just gonna keep wailing. And so, interestingly enough, whereas I think of a movie like Nobody with Bob Odenkirk or some of these films where it's like, oh, the guy's like secretly Secret Service or, he's got some service background and he's got some nuts training. He's just killing everybody. Part of me was expecting a little bit of that going in here. That action comedy, Boy Kills World comes to mind as a recent example. Like he's mute, but just kicks ass and can kill anyone in creative ways. That was not the case here. This man takes punches, he takes shots, he takes stabs. I was kind of a little surprised by some of it at times, but I was also so enjoyably surprised by just the way that he could kill people sometimes, or just the way it happened, maybe even accidentally, just as a result of like, I'm not trying to kill you, but like also I've got to defend myself and I can take a lot of pain and the threshold's weird. The movie's very creative, and I just have to give it major props for kind of taking some of your expectations and flipping them a bit, because I totally was thinking it was going to go one way, but I was very, very pleasantly surprised at how they kept him still the goofy, normal guy that he is, bumbling his way through this with his ability. I thought Jack Quaid was great. I don't know if the movie's made too much money, unfortunately, but it was one that I think is definitely worth checking out if you need a good action flick that has a little bit of romance and a little bit of humor. Like, this was way, way better than most of what I saw, truthfully, as far as what I've been catching up on. Very fun, bloody, action heavy, checks a lot of boxes really well, and checks a bunch of boxes for originality, at least. So that to me was a standout. But we're finally here. The movie, after 7 or 8 movies starting this year, the movie that I did not expect to be like, well, number one, the critics were wrong, or number one, the internet was wrong. Feeling that, yeah, this is not a new feeling for me, obviously. But Captain America Brave New World, which, essentially is the sequel to the Captain America and the Winter Soldier, Falcon and Winter Soldier TV show that they did, following up on some of those events as far as, yeah, we've got a new Falcon. We've got Captain America, who's like pseudo Falcon. Sam Wilson's got the nice Wakandan suit. He's Captain America-esque. He didn't take the super serum, though, which was a big thing if you didn't watch the TV show. He had the ability. They were like, hey, you could be Captain America. You could take the super soldier serum, which then leads to Sam discovering that, there were multiple people, including Black Captain Americas, who were tested on and kept from the public for decades, who are the original super soldiers, these test subjects who have lived longer than Cap has lived, The TV show, that was one of the more interesting TV shows they did, I'll say, for the Marvel DC, the Disney Plus TV stuff. Not all of it was great. You got John Walker as U.S. agent, Captain America variant, but it was nice having Bucky back, and I think he and, Sebastian Stan and Anthony Mackie, I think, have a great chemistry and camaraderie that really works in their advantage. So I think that, me personally too, I've been an Anthony Mackie fan for a while. Weirdly, he's another one where, of the Avengers or of some of the group, whether it's film critics or people, I know they've got some beef with Anthony Mackie, and I don't know why. I think he speaks his mind pretty well in public. He's not afraid to be a little bit more political, but he's also not afraid to be pretty sensible when he talks about things. So I've just, this is my own personal, like, leading up into this movie and reading everything that I did and then actually watching it was like, so many moments through the film, I was like, what were people complaining about? It's like, this is good. It's like, this is interesting. I was like, this is pretty intriguing. I'm like, this is more interested than I've been at the Marvel movies. I'm like, I can't even tell you the last Marvel movie that was like, was so good and so memorable. Like, there are bits of Black Panther too that I really liked. Some of the Ironheart stuff, maybe not, but there are definite aspects of that movie that were like, all right, cool. I'm not just watching a Marvel movie. I'm watching something that feels like it's got a little bit more substance as well. Watching, ironically, now that they touched back on it, but Chloe Zhao's film. See, this is the problem with Marvel, man. There's like 40 films that I have to remember. The Eternals. The Eternals. Didn't see The Eternals in theaters. Would have really enjoyed that in the theaters because it was like, this feels different. This doesn't just feel like, haha, hokey dory Marvel. Let's make some fun action movie and comedy and print $1 billion. Didn't feel like that. And so Captain America, much like how I think Winter Soldier sometimes felt, was like, okay, there's major espionage going on here. There's something behind the scenes that's working against this country. And now they're dealing with adamantium from the giant, colossal titan that's been out in the ocean for forever. That every movie is kind of like, oh yeah, it was that like hand coming out of the ocean from Eternals. So it's adamantium, which is Wolverine's claws. So this is clearly, now we're trying to lead into the X-Men and the mutants, and supposedly that'll be the next big phase of Marvel, maybe once they wrap up Secret Wars with the Fantastic Four, bringing all the heroes back again. Maybe that'll push us into the mutant era. And maybe we'll get a break actually for a little while from like the main characters. Because this is it's something that the Russos do and did well, being able to balance pretty stacked casts of all these superheroes. But now you've got people like Moon Knight, and you're throwing in all these Disney stars and Echo, and now we're bringing Daredevil in again. What are you gonna do with them all? I brought up this point with some friends recently while doing a sort of like superhero discussion type chat, and it was just like, maybe this would be a really good time for Marvel to just like wipe the slate clean afterwards. Like maybe we don't need to go into production with the White Vision TV show. Maybe we don't need to explore a second season of Moon Knight if it's going to take 4 years. Or if you're not going to give him a movie or something, let's just not do it. Just do some X-Men for a while, and continuously having to tie things into the universes. It becomes a juggling act that I'm kind of tired of doing. The one thing in Captain America Brave New World was like, okay, our villain, no spoilers, but it's a deep cut for Marvel for sure. One that also is kind of like, is that really your movie though? But whatever. There's the whole Fox versus Marvel, or the whole, oh, here's a movie that's technically not MCU, but there are canonical characters in it that are now in the MCU. Just this whole song and dance of like, okay, so of course, I mean, one of the bigger pieces of casting news in this film was Harrison Ford playing Thaddeus Ross. And this whole idea of like, okay, this is a character who's existed. I mean, William Hurt played him in the previous films. This is a character who's existed in the MCU, in the Incredible Hulk, with Edward Norton before the Mark Ruffalo recasting. There's just the way that Hulk has been treated has always been like a weird one to me. But I'm like, I guess the time for the Mark Ruffalo Hulk movie is gone and past. But there are remnants of some of that story popping up here in the film, which I'm a big fan of the Incredible Hulk, truthfully. So I was here for it, what they were doing with this movie. I don't know. Giancarlo Esposito popped up in this movie and the Electric State and something else I feel like I saw within the last few weeks too. And like, maybe that's another one where I'm like a little tired of him just being like the go-to bad guy. Like, I'm going to hunt everyone down, Moff Gideon. It's his role now. Boys, he's just playing the same character again. And you go get your money, Giancarlo, because he's great in everything that he does. But yeah, again, minor complaint. But yeah, I didn't expect Captain America to be the one where I was like, wow, I actually really enjoyed that. And that was better than more of the Marvel films that I've seen recently. So it's kind of why I led with, I haven't seen anything that has wowed me yet this year. That's also why I'm saving Bob Trevino and I'm saving Magazine Dreams for next week. And you're gonna get your 2024 roundup. But I promise you the good movies are coming. We got the Seattle International Film Festival kicking off in like 2 months, which I am so stoked for. Could not be more excited for that. Look forward to plenty of interviews, plenty of movie reviews, all sorts of festival coverage. It's good to be getting back into the groove of things here. You will be getting more of these episodes weekly again, just as everything is kind of settled down in life and working through things. I appreciate you guys also for tuning in and listening. You can find me at EdT Movie Reviews, all your social media platforms, podcast platforms, and at nicktiffany.com. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.